This is the Define R6 from Fractal Design. Let's check it out. All right, well, here she is. Doesn't look as good as it could because there's still some plastic on the tempered glass side panel here, which I'm going to remove right now for you. So good, so good. Ooh, ow, again. I should really wear an anti-static wristband. Ooh. Round two. All right, that looks a little nicer. I guess we can continue. This is, once again, the Define R6 from Fractal Design, successor to the Define R5, I guess a direct successor to that case, but there's definitely a pretty expansive list of Define cases now here at the end of 2017. We just had the Define C tempered glass, and Define C Mini. I think those were the most recent ones, and then there was the Define S before that, Define R5, Define R4, and yeah, so it's kind of interesting to see the Define series evolve with all of the PC case trends. You know, with the Define R5, we saw the option for removable drive cages, and then the Define C brought us tempered glass and a power supply shroud. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what the R6 has in store for us today. This is an ATX mid-tower. Now the MSRP for the tempered glass model that I have with me today is $150 US, or $149.99. If you don't care about tempered glass and you want to do away with it and replace it with a steel, sound dampened piece of steel, then it's 20 bucks cheaper. So there's that. But the tempered glass looks really nice. I guess I could talk about that really quick. It doesn't look like it's tinted very much at all. I mean, it's got some black borders on the edges, but I guess borders on the edges kind of redundant. But you know what I mean? It doesn't look too tinted, which I like. I actually don't like tinted side panels unless it's very, very light. You get two thumb screws here, but I think the thumb screws are just to reinforce the side panel in case you want to be shipping it or moving it around a lot, because you actually don't need thumb screws at all to put this thing back into place. You can see here, as it's already sort of mounted, you just kind of press it and it locks into place. Feels pretty sturdy. It doesn't like wobble or anything if you move the case, so that's good. Seems fairly high quality. Let's see, popping it out though, you kind of have to be careful because there's no like protective guard or latch at the bottom to catch the glass. So like if you had this case on a glass table, you wouldn't want to like accidentally drop it. Glass on glass might not end well for you. But it looks pretty nice. There's obviously no room for sound dampening material here, so not too big of a surprise there. I should not put this on top of the thumb screw. Let me try popping this guy back on just to see how it goes. Looks like you slide it in on the front end first and then all the way back. So it actually pops in very easy. The only thing I'll say is that it's kind of hard not to get fingerprints on it in the process. So you might want to have some Windex handy whenever you pop this guy on and off. Let's move on to the front though. The entire front panel of the case is genuine brushed aluminum. It's not faux brushed aluminum like we've seen on other Define cases in the past. So that's kind of nice. It is a bit more prone to fingerprints in that sense, but as long as you're okay and aware of that, it's very easy to open and close the door without actually touching the aluminum there. There's tons of ventilation on the sides, and as long as you don't mount the fans on the outside of the radiator bracket like I did with the Elite Belt, but that was intentional, then you should be able to get some healthy airflow. There's like really big openings. There's no mesh in these vents, but there is a mesh filter that is removable. It's just beneath a single 5 1/4 inch bay, and very easy to pop out. This is my first time. I have not like inspected this case at all. I looked at the reviewer's guide and the spec sheet thoroughly, but I have not actually put my hands on this case. Well, you're watching me do it for the first time. Underneath the dust filter at the front here, you get two included GP14 fans with those traditional white blades. And looks like you've got some pretty hefty radiator mounting options at the front here. You can either do up to a 280 or a 360, which is very nice indeed. Is there a dust filter at the front? Yeah, there is. Yeah, ha ha ha. Look at this, look at this bad boy. Woo! Looks like we've got some fan mounts at the bottom of the case, apparently. Not just filtration for your power supply fan, but I think you can do two 120s or 140s at the bottom of the case as well. Being able to just sort of wipe out all the dust from everything at the bottom of your fan all at the same time is pretty nice. Did I mention you can flip this door? Like if you don't want it to open from the right side, you can actually reverse the mounting so that it opens from the left. That's pretty cool. It's ambidextrous. Sorry. It's also got some sound damping material underneath, very nice as well. LED right there, very traditional for the Define series. Front panel, we've got what looks to be two USB 3.0, two USB 2.0. They're all Type A ports. A very nice heavy-duty power button. Reset, that's a little bit more difficult to press, which is a thumbs up for that. Mic and headphone jacks. Now yes, I know, for $150, where's the USB Type-C, Kyle? Where, why? Well, look what I have here, an aftermarket front panel alternative that has USB Type-C, 3.1 Gen 2 supported. All the other connectors and buttons are the same. The only difference is that it's got a Type-C header on it, or a Type-C port, and this is actually sold separately. And the reason that is because there's a very loud minority when it comes to front panel Type-C. There aren't a large number of people who want it, but the ones that do want it are very vocal about it in the comments and the forums and stuff. But the majority of us don't really have enough Type-C devices on hand to really warrant or justify spending that much more on a case simply for that privilege. So this is an option if you want to spend a little bit more to take advantage of that connectivity. But Fractal's trying to keep the cost down for the majority of the market who just really isn't ready for Type-C yet. So it's nice that they have the option though. They also have another add-on option for a riser card. There's vertical GPU mounting in this case that's supported, and that's we'll talk about that later on. But kind of nice that you get this guy just in case you want it. And then we've also got a giant Moduvent cover, just a single Moduvent cover that looks, let's see, how do you take this off? Do you just press it? It looks like you just kind of, no, you don't press it. That would have been nice. That would have been nice, Fractal, just saying. If I could have just like, choo-choo. I stand corrected, ladies and gentlemen. There's a nice big button, a nice big old fat button at the back of your case that actually pops the whole thing out. Oh, this is so much better than the old Moduvent system. And it's got some mesh underneath it, so it looks like there's a dust filter here. Is that right? Am I seeing this right? This is like, I'm discovering so many things for the first time. How do you take this out? Ah, there, finally. Interesting. Okay, cool. Look at this. It's just a giant dust filter now. The top Moduvent cover does have sound damping material, of course. It's very sturdy. Yeah, I mean, I could bend it because I'm strong, but it's not gonna accidentally get all twisted up. Very high quality, very durable. And then this is plastic, made of plastic, very similar as the front dust filter here. And I'm gonna pop it back in, just see what that looks like. Oh yeah, that looks pretty good actually. I just like the way it looks. Yeah, that's a lot of ventilation right there. If you want to put up to a 420 Blaze It radiator, you can do that up at the top of the case, or up to a 360 if you're going with some 120s. But hot damn, it's looking good so far, y'all. Get back in there. Get back in there, boy. Know your role. The right side panel is just a piece of steel with some captive thumb screws. Let me just confirm if they're captive. Oh, they are not captive. Why? I don't know. I should also mention these are flexible mounting strips, both at the top and front of the case. And it looks like the ones here on the top are positioned closer to the tempered glass side of the case, which would give you more clearance for things like your memory and VRM heat sinks, etc. Moving on to the back. Yeah, let's see what we got. It looks like your third and final included GP14 fan can also support a 120 or a 120 radiator, but there was no mention of 140 millimeter radiator support, just 120 or a 140 fan. You got 7 expansion slots that are traditional horizontal, and then you've got 2 vertical. If you opt for the optional riser card, you can actually put a 2-slot GPU in a vertical orientation in this case. Something not seen before on a Define case, unless I'm totally wrong about that. I could be wrong about that. Where's the riser card? There was a riser card, had a riser cable. Haha, so here it is. It's pretty nice actually. It kind of has like a black sleeving around the ribbon cable itself, some Fractal Design branding, but Fractal's basically taking the same approach with this as they are with the Type-C front panel kit. in the sense that not everyone's going to want vertical GPU mounts or vertical GPUs in their case. So this is an option if you want to pay a little extra. They'll ship one over to you, but they're not going to include it with every single case, with every single unit, and charge more for it when only a fraction of people buying it are actually going to use it. So I think it's a good thing that, you know, for something that's a bit more niche, to just sell the accessories required to use it separately for, you know, for those who care. And finally, at the bottom here, we've got a power supply bracket that's removable with 2 captive thumb screws. Comes off just like that. You mount this to the back of your power supply and you slot it in from behind. Pretty straightforward, nothing too fancy here. And that's pretty much gonna cover it for the outside of the case. I think on that note, let's go ahead and start building inside of this thing. Let me get some parts out for you. Be right back. All right, so it looks like we've got some pre-installed standoffs with a very happy one in the middle there. It's gonna help us guide her in. Oh, I should probably put the IO shield in first. Let's get this bad boy. Come here. I reckon we do the motherboard first and the radiator second. What y'all say? Good. All right. So that fits in lovely. Perfect. Let me mount this sucker down. All right, motherboard installed, and to install the radiator, I'm wondering if this panel is removable, if the radiator bracket on top of the case can actually be removed. Let me check. You know, I think this is removable, guys. We've got 4 screws here. I don't see any rivets. It looks like this side is just held in by some latches. So I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna say this is a modular radiator bracket. Oh yeah, definitely removable. Sweet! Bonus points for that one. All right, let me get this guy mounted. I'll be right back. So we've got our radiator mounted to the bracket, but before we install it back into the case, there's one thing we can do to make our lives a whole lot easier, and that is install or plug in our 12-volt CPU connector from our power supply, because once this radiator's in there, it's going to be kind of hard to access that plug. So let's go ahead, and I've already sort of wired it myself off camera. It's kind of good to go. I actually have it running through this rubber grommet here at the top of the case. There's actually 2 rubber grommets for passing such cables through. So there it is. Got our 8-pin our 8-pin 12-volt all plugged in, and we're ready for mounting the rest of this guy. So let's do that. All right, voila. Totally installed the AIO just now, no problems. All right, so our build here is coming along quite nicely. Haven't run into too many snags so far. I did want to point out that I'm using a Corsair fan on our Celsius S24 here because this is the same AIO that we used for the Yacht PC, and in the process, one of the fans just got misplaced and probably doesn't even work anyway. So yeah, that explains that. But I already mentioned the 2 rubber grommets that are at the top right above the motherboard. They're big enough to pass, you know, larger cables through, like your 12-volt CPU. Had no problem getting that through there. And then we've also got some nice large, 3 large ones right here, 2 to the right of the motherboard for your ATX, etc., USB 3, SATA, and then a large one at the bottom here. There's also a really small cutout here that's not grommeted. It doesn't have a rubber grommet, but it's just a regular cutout that's for like your HD audio and other small connectors. But these rubber grommets are really nice. They seem like they're actually like well stuck in there. Like they're not going to completely just fall out once you start passing cables through. It's not going to get snagged on anything. And then, you know, obviously the ones on the bottom here are going to be for your front panel connectors, USB 3 if you've got a header down there, and SATA potentially, because there's actually the option. Fractal Design includes 2 2.5-inch drive trays that you can mount either behind the motherboard tray, which is where they were originally when I took it out of the box, or you can mount them right here on the power supply shroud. Again, it kind of goes without saying that we have a power supply shroud in this case. So it just has 2 little latches that go into the It's a ventilated shroud, by the way. Tons of ventilation at the top here. And then just a single captive thumb screw that you would screw down like so. So it's completely toolless, unless you consider your hand a tool. And then, yeah, so you can either do one or the other, or both in either position. Looks pretty nice, and definitely easy to use. We'll save these for behind the motherboard tray though, since that's where we're headed eventually. Now towards the front of the case, we get sort of this wall of mystery, and it's got 2 thumb screws here, which we'll remove in just a moment. But behind this little wall here, which is made of steel, high quality, we have a couple drive cages, or drive trays, I should say. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there's 5, 6, 2 more at the bottom here that are sort of underneath the shroud. And they can house either 3.5-inch or 4.5-inch drives. And if you wanted to buy additional trays, you know, after the fact, you could even slot up to 11, I believe, behind this little wall here, and it's all concealed. It's hidden very nicely. But I'm kind of curious to see what happens once we undo these thumb screws here. So let's pop this off. Interesting. Let's flip this guy around for you so you can see. I won't hoard it all to myself. All right. So here we can see the business end of things, and it looks like a single thumb screw holding each of these trays in place, which is, you know, it's going to take you half the amount of time to undo it compared to most that have 2 thumb screws. Comes out like that. These are made of steel, painted white. Very nice. They got some rubber stoppers, or rubber pads to reduce noise and vibration, and they look very, very sturdy indeed. Now for some people, putting a lot of drives in their system really gets them going, but I reckon a lot of you would also be interested to see what kind of water cooling capabilities this guy has. And obviously we already know that there's plenty of rad support at the front of this case. And if you wanted to put in you know, a thicker radiator with a push-pull configuration or something like that, there's probably no room to do that with all of these trays taking up space. So let's just see what happens if we remove all of them. So what's neat about this design is that the trays are just kind of floating. There's not like a giant drive cage or some complex drive cage, but rather they're just sort of mounted to the motherboard tray with that 1 thumb screw and this front wall that we saw the other side of just a moment ago. But you know, when you take the trays out, it's pretty open. There's no interior skeleton or whatever that you're dealing with. So that's kind of nice. It just opens up the airflow a bit more, and you still have that wall concealing things. But I think there's a way to remove that wall, that plate, if you wanted to. You know what? I'm gonna flip this case around again. I really need to invest in a lazy Susan. Okay, so in order to remove this plate here, it looks like there are 2 screws, very accessible, just regular Phillips heads. I'm gonna undo those. And then it looks like there's 2 more screws, possibly at the bottom of the case. All right, here we go. 2 screws at the bottom. I like the fact that you don't have to remove the power supply dust filter, or the bottom dust filter, to access these. Remove that. So from the looks of it, there may be 2 more screws, or at least a few more screws at the front here. Probably got to pop off the front panel in order to access them. Comes off pretty easily, and I like the fact that the front panel isn't tethered by any of the front panel connector cables, so it's free. Whee! We've got 2 screws that I would imagine. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo. There we go. Come on. Come on. Oh, geez. Little tricky now that I have the AIO installed, the radiator. Maybe I should just remove the radiator bracket just to avoid scratching anything. Remember, kids, always read the manual. It helps save time and energy. Come on. Oh yeah, much easier without the radiator in the way, the radiator bracket. And I think this guy, this panel that we just removed, can actually be relocated to the back of the case, more towards the, to be in line with the motherboard tray. Just try to figure out how exactly that fits. All right, looks like we've got it in position. We just gotta secure it down. 2 screws in the bottom. All right, now we can just reseat our radiator. And we mustn't forget the attractive faceplate thing here. Go back inside. And voila, and now you'll see that this looks very much more like a Define S or something, where it's just a bunch of empty space here in the front for water cooling radiators, or if you just want some unimpeded airflow, you have that option. So you kind of get the best of both worlds here with this case. You have the flexibility to have almost two almost completely different internal layouts, which is pretty sweet. Where do the fan cables get routed? I guess it also goes without saying while I'm here that you cannot have a top radiator at least this long, or maybe even like, you know, I'd say you probably couldn't get away with more than like a 240 or so and still have an optical drive, but who uses those anymore? And then, yeah, where do the fan cables go? The fan cables, I guess, could go... So it looks like the only real cutouts to route your fan cables through, at least at the front of the case here, in this configuration are these cutouts that we saw the drive trays poking through earlier. So they're plenty big to route your 3 or 4 pin fan cables or fan connectors through. And I kind of tucked the wiring behind the fan, sort of between the fans and the back panel here, just to give us a cleaner look. Really quick, just wanted to show you the bottom of the case here. You can actually mount a 240 or a 280 millimeter radiator or fans if you like, but that's kind of nice if you just want to direct some airflow upwards to your various components. And also the fact that the power supply shroud is well ventilated would definitely also aid in airflow if you were to mount any fans or radiators down at the bottom there. All right, power supply. You guys remember that I already plugged in the 12 volt CPU connector. So now, gotta just route the other guys here. Obviously we have to route them through the back before we slide the power supply through. And I can confirm that there is not enough clearance for you to actually install the power supply from behind the motherboard tray. You have to do it from the very rear of the case. Some cases will let you do both. This is a rear entry only, if you know what I mean. All right, our power supply has been installed with relatively little effort. All right, so we got a nice big CPU cooler cutout, and you can see here we actually have full access to our AM4 backplate. So that's good news. Sometimes you'll have a really large CPU cutout, but it only eclipses part of a bracket, especially larger ones, and that's no bueno. So good thing we've got a fairly large one here that's in the right spot. And then we also have a six fan hub, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it looks like you can connect up to 3 PWM devices as well. That's awesome. So these are 3-pin, these are 4-pin, and obviously you have SATA power to drive it with a 4-pin connector that would go to your motherboard. That's nice, especially if you're gonna be doing some water cooling, even some push-pull configurations, a lot of fans. Those fans add up fast, so it's nice to not have to route them all to your motherboard and have to resort to using splitters and things like that. Helps keep things tidier, obviously, as well. Speaking of tidy, we've got some tie-down points and Velcro straps to help us along. Oop, that came out pretty easily. That's what she said. So let me show you where all the tie-down points are really quick. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then you've got 10, 11, 12 right here on the actual front of the case. And looks like you've got some more here, 12, 13, 14, 15 on the very bottom of the chassis. So plenty of tie-down points, Velcro straps to help you with everything, and of course the power supply shroud, so you can just kind of shove everything down there if you really don't care. Another thing that I should mention before I forget is that you can still house 2 3.5-inch drives in the current configuration here. After we removed all those drive trays, it's not like you have to resort to a 2.5-inch drive only system. You can still mount 2 3.5-inch mechanicals right there to the back of this thing. You just have to pop off the that thumb screw panel on the front, and yeah, and you can install it pretty easily. So that's nice. Super flexible. Also, circling back to those drive trays, those 2.5-inch drive trays, you can, I did mention earlier that you can mount them either on the power supply shroud as I demoed before, or behind the motherboard tray, and they would go right here. Boom, side by side. There's one, and your other would go right next to it. So, plenty of options. It is time to install our GPU. Black thumb screws for our white expansion slots. She's coming in hot! Ugh. So we've currently got a GTX 1080 Ti Founders Edition in here with plenty of room to spare. Even if we had the drive trays reinstalled you know, like so and stuff, you still have at least a good inch, maybe two, before you run into clearance issues. And even then, I mean, it's so flexible, you can actually mount the drives around where the GPU would extend to. That way it can just continue extending. I think the manual said 440 millimeters of length for your GPU. And that's more than enough for most people. As far as the clearance for the CPU cooler, if you are going to be going with a tower instead of an AIO, I think it's 185 millimeters of clearance there, and you get 300 millimeters of clearance for a power supply before you run into any issues. On that note, we're just about done here. We just got to wire everything up and call it a day. All right, system complete, and it looks really nice, actually. If you take all the proper measures to use the right grommets and you know, the cable routing holes and stuff, it looks nice and tidy, and you don't really have to put in that much legwork to make it look that way, because it's just it's a good design. It's really nice, you know, full-length power supply shroud, tons of tie-down points behind the motherboard tray, Velcro straps, things like that. There's probably an inch, maybe an inch and a half, inch and a quarter of space behind there too, so plenty of room when you factor in the basement and stuff. And seemingly lots of airflow. Obviously, go over to, you know, someone who's tested it actually, besides me, like, I don't know, Gamers Nexus maybe has done some proper testing on the airflow in this case, but it looks promising. Then again, you never know. But tons of radiator support, I like that. It's going to be great for custom water coolers. I wish there was a dedicated reservoir mount. I don't know, maybe there is behind this little panel here. It didn't look like there was. I could be wrong. I'll put a little annotation if I'm wrong, but that would have been nice. And then also, I have to say that one of my favorite things about this case is that somebody else could do a build in an R6 and it would look completely different than mine. Not because of the components that they chose, but because of the internal layout that they opted for. Obviously, I kind of went with a more Define S-esque look by removing all of the hard drive trays, but you know, somebody else might want that in place and just have it fully stacked, you know, to the brim with hard drives or something like that. So I'm a huge sucker for flexibility. I think it prolongs the longevity, so to speak, of a case. Keeps you from having to buy a new one just for a different situation or scenario. And overall, for 150 bucks, I'm pretty happy with it. I would buy this case for 150 bucks of my own money, just because I think it's very well thought out. It's built to last. My Define R5 and S are still both kicking strong, and this is built with the same sort of quality and engineering as those cases from what I can tell. So overall, guys, fantastic case. Good job, Fractal, once again. Go ahead and leave your own thoughts, comments, concerns in the comments below. I'll be sure to read them and check them out. Curious to hear what you guys have to say as always. Feel free to toss me a like on this video if you enjoyed it. I know it might have been a little lengthy and kind of random. I've got awesome hardware in about an hour, and I haven't even started taking my notes. So yeah, this episode's gonna be awesome. Yes, all that said, go ahead and check me out on FLOATPLANE if you want to see videos like this up to a week early without ads. I'll put a link in the description below. Apart from that, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a good one, and I'll see you in the next video.